Today, we're going to dive into one of the most powerful books I think I've ever read, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's actually a pretty short book. He wrote it in just 9 days. But its message, wow, it is absolutely timeless. It's his account of surviving the Holocaust, but it's so much more than that. It's really a guide to finding a purpose, even when it feels like all hope is completely gone. So, who was Viktor Frankl? Well, he was a psychiatrist in Vienna before he and his family were arrested and sent to the Nazi concentration camps, including the infamous Auschwitz. He lost everyone: his parents, his brother, his pregnant wife. When he was finally liberated, he was haunted by one single burning question. How did anyone, manage to survive the camps when the chances of living were basically zero? And this quote from Nietzsche, it's the key to the whole book. Frankl builds his entire philosophy around this one idea. He saw firsthand that the prisoners who made it through weren't always the strongest or the healthiest physically. No, the ones who survived were the ones who had a reason to live, a why. That why gave them the unbelievable strength to endure the unimaginable how of camp life. Now, Frankl noticed that prisoners went through three pretty distinct psychological phases. And the first one, it began the absolute moment they arrived. And it was a state of just pure, unadulterated shock. Imagine this. You arrive at Auschwitz, you're herded into two lines. An SS officer stands there and casually plays what Frankl calls the finger game. He just points, left or right. That simple gesture was a verdict on your existence. About 90% of the people on that transport were sent to the left, which meant straight to the gas chambers. The few sent to the right were, for the moment, destined for forced labor. Frankl himself arrived desperately clinging to a manuscript he had hidden in the pocket of his coat. It was a scientific book that held his entire life's work. In his desperation, he tried to explain to a seasoned prisoner how important it was, hoping he could somehow save it. He asked him, "You understand that, right?" And the response he got from that prisoner was a single, bellowed word: shit. In that exact moment, Frankl got it. He understood the brutal new reality. His past life was gone. It meant nothing. He had to completely strike out his former self just to survive the next minute. After being stripped of every single possession, shaved from head to toe, and pushed into showers, the prisoners were left with literally nothing. Frankl says this realization was so total, so completely absurd, that it was actually met with a kind of grim, dark sense of humor. They had nothing left to lose, except, as he put it, their so ridiculously naked life. Frankl uses this quote from Dostoevsky to really sum up this first phase. The prisoners were shocked to find that they could survive conditions that medical textbooks would say were completely unsurvivable. They learned they could sleep on hard boards, that they wouldn't freeze in thin clothes, that they could endure near starvation. They adapted, but the process of how they adapted was a horror beyond words. So after that initial shock eventually wore off, prisoners entered the second phase, a state of apathy. This sounds terrible, but it was actually a necessary emotional death. It was like a protective shell they had to develop, simply to endure the daily, constant horrors. And it's in this phase that Frankl discovers a really profound paradox. The more brutal and empty the external world became, the more intense and rich their inner spiritual lives grew. To survive, they had no choice but to retreat inward, into their own minds. And this inner world became an absolute lifeline. Prisoners would spend hours having these incredibly detailed mental conversations with their spouses. They'd notice a small moment of beauty, like a sunset over the camp, with an intensity they had never felt before in their lives. They even used humor as a weapon, a way to rise above the suffering, even for just a second. There's this one scene, he's on a death march in the freezing dark, and he's just thinking intensely about his wife. He doesn't even know if she's still alive. And right then, in that moment, he has this incredible insight that love is the ultimate and highest goal a person can aspire to. The image of his beloved just held in his mind gave him more strength than anything else. This deep, rich inner life is what led Frankl to the most crucial discovery of his entire experience. It's what he calls the last of the human freedoms. And this is the question at the very heart of the book. I mean, think about it. When you are stripped of absolutely everything, your family, your job, your name, your dignity, is there anything left that you control? Do you have any choice at all? And here is Frankl's world-changing answer. The guards could control his body, they could control his environment, his ultimate fate, but they could not control his response. He saw it with his own eyes. He saw men walking through the huts, comforting others, giving away their very last piece of bread. They were living proof that this inner freedom can never, ever be taken away. And this is the point that's so crucial. The sort of person a prisoner became wasn't just a result of the camp's influence, it was the result of an inner decision. Even in that hell on earth, a person could decide what they would become, mentally and spiritually. They could choose to preserve their human dignity. So, how do we apply all this? Well, this is where Frankl takes this incredibly powerful insight and transforms it into a philosophy for finding meaning in our own lives, especially in our own suffering. Frankl argues that suffering is just an unavoidable part of life, like fate and death, and since you can't escape it, it has to have a potential meaning. It's not the suffering itself that's meaningful, but our response to it, the way we choose to bear our cross. That's where we can find a deep purpose. He boils it down to 3 main ways we can discover meaning in our lives. First, by creating a work or doing a deed, having a project. Second, by experiencing something or encountering someone, basically through love. And third, when we're faced with a fate we cannot change, we find meaning in the attitude we choose to take toward that suffering. And that leaves us with this final, powerful question. Frankl's experience proved that forces beyond your control can take away everything you have, except for one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond. So in the face of your own challenges, big or small, the question is, what will you choose?